Welcome, everybody. It is me, and I should not have done that. The Cyber Warrior. This is Cyber Warrior Studios, and I know you're all here for another amazing episode of Security Happy Hour. Big show planned. I got a guest coming on that it's been a long time since me and him even talked. I think we talk once a year at B-Sides, and he's on this show like once. Man, we need to bring him back on more often. But hey, anyways, for all my GRC fam in the house, we're going to be talking GRC AppSec and continuing education and how to improve your career through education and things you can do to advance in cybersecurity. So give us about 10 seconds and we'll be right back. And we're back. And we're back. With me this evening, I have the one and only Scott Jones. Me and Scott have caught up a few times. One of the few people I've actually met in the industry outside of like people I've worked for, that I met through like Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that. We actually met at B-Sides Pittsburgh, which is amazing, I might add. Me and you always end up BSing for at least a little bit. But with that being said, how you been, man? How's your evening?
Oh man, it's been wild. Just busy as hell. Like never a dull moment for sure.
Is there ever a dull moment in cybersecurity? Ever? Ever? I don't think. But with that, so when you came on the show before, we were definitely heavily invested in GRC, and that was the topic of the day. And we're going to bring it back up again because I don't think it's talked about enough. But I do also want to talk about the other topics, right? AppSec and just continuing education and furthering your career through education. But I figure we will start with GRC today. Space Tacos, who's amazing, loves when we talk GRC. So, in your eyes, with all the changes going on right now, where is the GRC landscape? How is it changing, developing, things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably the biggest way that I see it change is with the focus on GRC engineering now. Sorry, the cat is an asshole. No, with GRC engineering, and I think what we're probably going to see in the coming weeks, hopefully, is with FedRAMP. For anybody that's gone through the FedRAMP process or tried to get started in the FedRAMP process, it's painful. It's they've made it for the decade it's existed. They've made it so painful for even large vendors to get onboarded into the platform. SMBs like the organization I work for. It makes it extremely difficult because we're trying to compete to get into this space, and to even get on their radar, you have to jump through 50 million hoops, let alone the actual work that goes into the vetting process and everything else. Right. But Chris Hughes that runs Aquia Security, and he's an advisor at Endor. He's a friend. He posted something earlier today on LinkedIn that kind of piqued my interest, because supposedly in the next week or so, the fine folks at who is it that one of the three-letter organizations that spend our tax money so wisely.
So well. It's spent so properly.
Absolutely. I love seeing the asinine amount I pay every year. Just
every paycheck.
Oh my God. I look at my pay stub, I want to cry. I'm like, oh. But what they're talking about supposedly is putting more of the onus on the private sector to be able to automate and do continuous authorization to operate, which is, Fed speak for, hey, you're okay, we'll buy your product, we'll run your product, and we're good. Where the current way that they verify that is what, like once a year they'll come through, you'll do your audit, and like
Mm.
once every 3 years you have to go through the bigger process. But with everybody kind of shifting into more of an automation, automate all the things, right? Um, that
All the things, all the things. Let's automate everything so we no
exactly,
longer have a job.
exactly. Let's automate the automation. Fuck it, just throw everything at it. Um, but yeah, it's they're talking about with this continuous ATO, being able to constantly validate that the CSPs are doing what they're supposed to do. So, I haven't seen a lot of firm documentation on exactly how that's going to look. Like I said, hopefully next week sometime,
Yeah.
um, they're going to come out with actual RFCs for it and all that.
So with FedRAMP, this so many freaking. I always mix up. I'm not a GRC person, so I always mix up like regulation and policy to framework, um, that type of thing. So is CMMC directly tied to FedRAMP? Like, do you need to be a certain CMMC um, level to be a certain FedRAMP level? Like, how's that work out?
So, they could simplify it like that, but in true government fashion, they've chosen to make it as difficult and expensive on everybody as possible. So the challenge is, FedRAMP is it's civilian agencies. So you've got your Department of Interior types and that sort of thing,
Hmm.
where CMMC is specific to Department of Defense.
Okay.
So there was talk, and with Katie Arrington, uh, who's a great follow on LinkedIn, extremely intelligent person. Love seeing her comments. She actually helped push CMMC 2.0
Hmm.
to where it is today. Multiple years of effort, but um, no, unfortunately, it's two different things. But the hope is that let's say you're FedRAMP certified to like a moderate level. So like you're not in the Fisher Price Mickey Mouse type of level, but you're also not top secret SCI with a polygraph type of level.
Right.
You're that middle of the road. You're handling some PII, maybe some like controlled unclassified info, something like that. there there's been rumors that there may be some some sort of trying to think of the right word to use, but kind of basically like an executive edict almost that says if you're FedRAMP if you're FedRAMP moderate, if you're FedRAMP high, that translates into CMMC level 2 or level 3.
Okay.
Um, Today that doesn't exist, and as much effort that Katie and all of those folks have put in, I hope they'll get it to that point. But I'm not going to hold my breath. So you really have to ask yourself, what verticals am I trying to get into with the feds? Am I focused more on the civilian side, or do I want to try and do more DoD type of business? Or maybe you already do DoD business. You need to get yourself caught up and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is why GRC, the concept of GRC doesn't frustrate me. It is the way I think a combination of cybersecurity professionals and regulators and government have really frustrated me as we've not been able to there why can we not come up with one solid framework? Why can we not come up with one solid, hey, whether you're PCI, or federal or whatever, why do we have all these different things that we have to abide by depending on what area you live in, right? And even when you look at the banking industry and things like that, you've got SOX and SOC 2 and like depending on where you fall, like all these different things. And not all of them have to do with cyber, but cyber falls into now a lot of these standards. So why that has been, I think, the most frustrating thing for me because you have NIST, you have C it's escaping me now. Um not CISA. The one that begins with a C. For some reason, it escaped me. You've got CMMC, right?
Yeah.
So there's NIST. There's another one that begins with a C. There's CMMC. There's PCI DSS. There's other frameworks, other regulations, all this stuff. And so I think why can we not one framework, one regulatory audit?
That would
And you just
be,
do your levels, right? Like to your
yeah.
point, if you're working with government at top secret, you need all of this hardened. You need to do all of this. If you're working with credit card information and people's PII and things like that, it should be held to the same standard. If you're working in healthcare, so with HIPAA and high trust and things like that, same standard. Why do we have different standards for different things? Like people's personal data is personal data. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
That's a hell of a good question. And there is no good answer for that. Look at the privacy
Mhm.
frameworks. That's another one of my big focus areas, and that's enough to make anybody drink. Like it's absolutely clear. Like GDPR when it came out in 16, I thought that was bad. I thought that was a pain in the ass. But then you start looking at the patchwork of shit that we've created across all these different states that they're similar, but they're just different enough that you can't follow one simple thing. And
Oh,
so,
and California was the first state to go the route of GDPR.
yeah,
And hey, you need to be able to remove your data, do all these different things, da 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 da. But I think it was done. The problem I have with it, I agree with the premise. I disagree with the execution.
yeah,
In that now GDPR in the UK and things like that, and I'm sure you've seen, they want access to all encrypted channels. You're no longer allowed to have encryption overseas
yeah.
in some of these areas. And so eh, if I can't be private, then what is going on here? Like then what's the point of GDPR? What's the point to these privacy regulatory things that you're trying to implement if you're going to erase all privacy and say I need to be able to see everything you're doing?
Well, it's one of those things where the UK in general it's become really it's become really scary, to put it bluntly. Like, I've got friends over there. Eliza May Austin. She's an old friend,
Oh,
and
dude, Eliza was
oh,
on the show before. I was actually half tempted to get her back on again, but over when you're across the pond, it's really hard to get on a show like this.
oh,
Oh.
she's a riot. But I've talked to her in passing a little bit about this stuff, and I see other folks that I know from over there talking about it. And you can't. There is no freedom of speech anymore, and it's a when they started down
Well,
that.
well, hold up. I'm going to pause you on that one because people conflate freedom of speech, especially here in the U.S. Freedom of speech is the freedom of religion to practice your own religion in your own household, right? Because we're talking about the First Amendment there, and the freedom to um, talk about your government, criticize your government. I'm sure there's one more tenet to it, but those are ultimately the two things. However, on a private company's site, that's up to them. Now, that being said, the UK has gone overboard, and yes, to your point, freedom of speech is gone. It's out the window. If you criticize the government, they've started going after people.
Yeah.
But I want people to understand that, at least here with the First Amendment, freedom of speech was not freedom of consequences. It was not freedom to, say whatever you want and not get your teeth knocked in. It was freedom to criticize your government and not have any repercussions for it. You were allowed to criticize. You're allowed to say what you want. We're not any, some of these other countries, but that was it. So when people say freedom of speech and they're being derogatory, they're saying the most heinous shit out there. That's not freedom of speech, dude. Now you're just being an asshole.
Right. And that you brought up a great point, and that's something I try to stress to people too is, freedom of speech isn't freedom of from consequences. Like if you say something dumb and just completely out of left field, I mean, God, look at Kanye and the insane shit that he started spewing.
Dude.
Like
Dude, when
there
50 goes after Kanye, there's a problem.
right. As soon as he pops in the chat, it's like, oh no. But it's like, Kanye is a great example because he's been off the rails for forever, and it's cost him money. Like there are
Mhm.
consequences to being an asshole and an idiot. But over there, if you post a meme that the
Right.
government doesn't like they're coming after you. It's absolute insanity.
Which is why they want access to these encrypted channels now. They can say, and this is the problem what we're seeing here in the US now too, right? So you've got Apple, Google, Facebook, all these companies are like, oh, end-to-end encryption. But hey, we're gonna scan all your shit and look at all your shit to make sure you're not doing anything illegal. The premise I understand, but the execution is flawed because now you have opened yourself up to, I'm going to scan everything and I can, some Joe Schmo that's just looking at things coming across can see all my shit now.
Right.
Which which means what's the point of privacy? Because now we have all this to the effect of, and I think it was you that reposted it on LinkedIn, Amazon and Google, and I'm sure Apple does it too. They're always listening. For anybody who was an idiot and thought, oh, they don't pay attention, dude. We're talking when smart devices first came out. All you had to do was say, hey, I'm looking for you and your spouse, your significant other, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your kids could be talking about anything, and that would show up in your advertisements that day, the moment you opened your phone. So to sit there and say, oh, they weren't listening, no, they've always been listening. And and now it's just more and more is coming out about it.
Right. It's yeah, it's a scary thing, and that was Amazon starting to try to figure out how to monetize Alexa, uh,
Mhm.
the as opposed to keeping the voice recordings local. Which, if you honestly believe they were doing that, I got some great beachfront property in on a swamp in Florida to sell you. Like
Right.
it's bullshit. But no, the uh, the government exists to try and in it exists to try and provide governance, right? Like try to
Right.
provide a structure and framework for people to not kill each other, right? Like that's at a very basic level. That's why government is a thing. The problem becomes when you've got these lifetime politicians that want to maintain power, and there's a certain psych profile for these for the people that crave and go after that sort of power. There's some level of they'll do anything to maintain it. So in order to do that, they feel that they can't trust the general population. So they're going to try to find any and every way to figure out and stop and not quell.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
and just thinking about it, do you think that is why the legality and the way policy and governance and things like that within infrastructure, within our critical infrastructure, like all the GRC stuff that goes into it. So you're looking at um what's the power one? It's shit. My
Oh,
dad worked in GRC for power.
FERC,
Um
FERC, I
yeah,
think is
yeah.
the yeah.
NERC and SIP and all that stuff. Do you think some of this stuff was written so vaguely as a way to, when the government wants to step in, they have that loophole, those loopholes to be able to do whatever the hell they want?
Absolutely. And, we saw that when the Supreme Court, trying to think of when it was, it's been within the last year or so, when they overturned the Chevron principle. So
Hmm.
going back to like I think it was in the 80s, there was a case that said, Congress essentially wasn't smart enough or capable of writing regulations for, in this case, I think it was environmental stuff.
I mean,
So,
they're not wrong.
well, yeah,
Really not.
basically a group of monkeys flinging shit at the wall.
It's like muggles trying to be wizards. It's just not possible.
But
Look, yes, I'm that asshole. I'll do it. I'll say it.
that's why I love you, man.
Ugh.
Uh, but basically, that's why they created all these regulatory agencies and they write these laws so vaguely that Congress has to do the least amount of work possible. It
Right.
gets shifted to unelected bureaucrats in these agencies, some of which have done good stuff. Like there has been some stuff like the EPA and some of the water safety standards, things like that. Stuff that it needed to have been done long ago, and they got some of that stuff done. More often than not, though, they also do things that aren't in the interests of the general population. They're in the interest of the businesses and
Protecting
lobbyists.
their asses.
Right. Stay in that job as long as possible. In order to do that, you don't bite the hand that feeds you,
So,
which
so how does that though? I guess my biggest question with that though is, when we're looking at cybersecurity and we're looking at it from a lens of protection, do you feel that the regulatory bodies, the frameworks, that everything that's out there is really meant to protect, or just to provide a CYA?
I think it was created with the intent to protect and force companies to do better, but in reality, these enforcement actions don't have teeth, and so it's all theater for the most part, which is unfortunate. Um,
Well, yeah, because if you look at the largest organizations, like look at SolarWinds, look at CrowdStrike, look at any of these, and I think Oracle, something came out about Oracle today. You look at these major companies, they're multi-billion-dollar organizations, if not larger. And if they get breached, what's the worst that happens? Like, legitimately, what, unless people quit utilizing their services, what's the worst that's going to happen? Nothing.
like,
Absolutely nothing. You might get a fine of like $10 million. Okay, cool. That's 1% of 1% of my budget. Here you go. Like,
right, you
it
can
doesn't affect it.
right, you write it off as a loss. And I mean, look at the Change Healthcare debacle. You're talking about just about every person in
But
the
every
United
small
States.
business, every small hospital suffered from that. Change did not. It was the smaller hospitals that truly suffered because their shit was offline and they could not come back up.
Right. They couldn't process payments. They couldn't process prescription fills, things like that. Like the supply chain weaknesses with that whole thing were insane. And then you look at everybody's personal info that got compromised as a result of that too. So you've got these small regional hospitals, like in the areas we live in. We're not in huge cities, right? Like we're at least where I'm at, it's considered rural.
That's me too.
So, the small providers around here really took a big financial hit. But, we're talking about, I'll use myself as an example. My stuff's been caught up in so many breaches over the last handful of years. Like you know,
Dude,
I
a breach a day would not even bother me at this point. The moment OPM was breached, my shit was out there.
right.
The most that has changed since that breach probably is my address. That's about it. Maybe a phone number or two. But let's be real. Like your social security doesn't change, your birth date doesn't change, your name doesn't change. So at most, like my address. Cool. Like so so that which so that gets back to the whole standpoint of does any infrastructure, any government, any company really fucking care? Because that was probably at the time the biggest breach at that point in time. Now we've had larger ones since then, but we're talking veterans, active duty, guard, reserve, FBI, anybody who had a security clearance went through OPM. That shit got hit. What'd they do? Oh, here's LifeLock for a year. Have fun. Like, so I
Yeah.
can't sue you. I can't do nothing. Like, legitimately, it's hey, here's LifeLock for a year. You'll be okay. It'll be all right. And I've legitimately gotten letters in the mail with my social as an account number. Now I know all my debt. I know every red cent I owe to people. And my wife was worried. I was like, that's because my information got out there. I'm like, whether through OPM or some other third party, Equifax, you name it,
Right.
like it's out there. You can use that and just say, oh, yeah, this is the account number. The fuck? No, it's not. That is somebody got my information from the dark net or from some other leak. But again to the point though? What's the repercussion? Nothing.
Well, that's just
Nothing.
it. And the SEC, I was cautiously optimistic that something they were actually going to be able to crack down, at least on public companies with that. But it seems like that stuff is being pulled back also, which is good and bad, right? Like I look at it as a CISO and the potential risk that comes with, um, you know, if you look at, I think Tim Brown is the one. I can't remember if he was Uber or SolarWinds, but
But either
you know,
way, they fried the CISO. The CISO
right,
became the fall guy. And
exactly,
they see, but again, here's the problem with companies and it look, I understand we need to make money, right? Capitalist nation as a business, your whole goal is to make money and have revenue. But and this is I have actually talked to a lot of CISOs and told them, get your CEO sign off so you're not held liable.
exactly.
Because the first thing they're going to do is use you as the fall person, right? Man, woman, child, doesn't fucking matter. You're the fall guy for this shit. And so if you get their sign off that, hey, I am accepting this risk, you can't be held liable, which means if they fire you because of X, Y, and Z, and you had them sign off on it, now you got legal recourse that you can take. I told you about this. You didn't listen. You said, yep, it's okay. We need to make money.
That's exactly it. And a CISO I worked under a few jobs ago, great dude, taught me a lot. Um, came from the retail side of things. So he dealt with PCI, he dealt with SOX, he dealt with all that stuff. And
Right.
one of the things he told me early on was, it's not just the business when you tell them, hey, this is gonna we have a potential loss expectancy of 600K or $1 million if this thing happens.
Hmm.
um, they're going to sit there and say, well, what's the likelihood? Well, it depends. And more often than not, because I've seen it in past lives, they're so quick to just say, "Yeah, screw it. We'll deal with it when that time comes." And it's like, you sure about that? So what he one of the things he stressed was, anytime you're getting the business to accept that, if they want to accept an inordinate level of risk, like you're telling them this is going to be really bad and it more than likely is going to happen. You sure you want to do this? And
Right.
they're so quick to say, yeah, 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 it's fine, it's fine. Put it on paper
Mhm.
and force them to physically sign it.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
as soon as you put pen to paper, that's when shit gets very real, because the business thinks in terms of like contracts and things like that.
Mhm.
So when you put something like that in front of them and they have to sign it, they actually have to stop and think and say, "Oh, well, maybe this isn't a great idea. Maybe we
Right?
need to
Maybe I
put."
shouldn't be doing this. Like, no, but you're not wrong, and so I do. I think from a GRC perspective, you know, having CISOs, or and let's be fair, not all companies have CISOs. They have security directors or senior security directors or VPs of security or whatever. You have to force those executives to put their name on it.
Yeah,
If there's a risk, you should not be held liable if it's like, hey, it's going to cost X amount to mitigate this or to remediate it. Like, it should not be your name on that if that risk acceptance is required. Now, I will say, if it is poor management and poor direction from the CISO or director,
yeah,
that's a whole different can of worms.
right.
If it's a piss poor job performance, sorry, homie, you out. That's all there is to it.
Right. If it's pure negligence, like that's a really common, really basic tenet of any kind of contract law, right? Is negligence, or you failed, performance failures, things like that,
Right.
whatever you want to call it. That stuff, that stuff. If you're a bonehead about it, yeah, you deserve to get
Mhm.
hung out to dry. Uh, it's same as freedom of speech. It's not freedom of consequences, right? Like you can't
Right.
just write a blanket indemnity and say, "Oh, whoopsie."
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I think what a lot of security folks get wrong too is they think security owns the risk when that's not the case. Security is there to advise on risk, to advise on controls, and if you need to outsource it, or if you need to pay for a new product or service or something to mitigate the risk, you help do that cost benefit analysis. But at the end of the day, there are very few risks that security should actually own, because
Yeah.
risk, the very nature of business is risk, right? Like
Right.
you take a risk by starting a business, by getting into business. I mean, shit, we take a risk every morning when we get out of bed, right? Like there's a chance I could trip and, on my way to the
Dude,
bathroom.
you got a better chance of dying walking across the street or driving a car than you do most other things. Let's be fair.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of my favorite, things to reference with people. Um, um, no, one of my favorite things to do with people, and I say it half jokingly when I do, talking about business continuity, things like that. What if I go out and I get hit by a beer truck?
Yeah.
Um, what happens next? What if the CEO gets hit by a UPS truck carrying my tequila or whatever? Some outlandish scenario, but it's not that far off, and it actually gets people thinking: is that damn, what do we do if something were to happen like that?
Right.
Um, so it's it, you know that's and that's where, with with the FTC was trying to do a little bit with enforcing regulations. I will say the DOJ was trying to get aggressive. I don't know if they're still getting aggressive with, government contractors under False Claim Act lawsuits, um, because what we've seen. A guy on LinkedIn who's another excellent follow if you have an interest in CMMC, Jacob Horn. He runs, I think it's called Summit Seven, is a consulting company he runs. But he's talked a little bit about the government and these contractors that, um, because in the prior iteration of CMMC, there was no independent audit.
Right.
You self-assessed and you signed off that you met, the NIST. I think it's 800 171. You met those controls, and off the races you go. Nobody actually validated if that was true unless something happened, and then they'd come in and say, "Oh, you weren't doing thing 1, 2, 3, whatever."
Right.
And so you look at, I think it was, it was Georgia Tech recently. I think it was towards the end of last year that got popped with an FCA suit because they weren't meeting the requirements that they had to meet. And what's really interesting, and this is another problem that CMMC is bumping up against, they the regulation says something to the effect of you have to meet NIST 800 171 standards. Right now they're at revision 2, but revision 3 is coming out um, soon, supposedly.
R3 will probably just include more cloud shit.
There's more cloud shit. There's also some other changes to controls, some other stuff, even for on-prem that wasn't in the in Rev 1 or 2.
Right.
And so what's happening is a lot of contractors aren't paying attention. And so when you start mentioning it to them, like, hey, did you know this thing is in there that you have to be able to prove? And they're like, what? And so when 171 Rev 3 actually drops, um, you know, there's a lot of contractors that are going to get caught with their pants down. So if they're trying to get CMMC certified, and they've done it up to Rev 2, but they can't get assessed and certified until after Rev 3 comes out, they're going to fail. So they just wasted
Right.
a ton of money on that external assessment. And it's taking, these assessors are booked out months and months because there's only there's only a handful of C3 PAOs to do the CMMC assessments.
Well, with that being stated, I want to kind of like guide this conversation now into the AppSec side of things, because that comes down to a lot of pen testing, right? When you're talking web app and just pen testing in general and things like that in AppSec, those are booked out usually, and it takes a year, some 6 months to a year to get somebody in. When you're looking at these, the cost to get an auditor in there, especially with now, let's be fair, CMMC, it's changed. They've got 2.0, and it took what, how many years for that to come out? But in the years these changes are taken, you can only get certified at what's out now. And
Right.
if something changes and you're in your year window, maybe you have a year, whatever. But either way, when you're looking at budgets, you don't know when GA is going to come out for certain, standards. So it's like, oh yeah, it's in Rev 3.2 beta. Like, okay, so when am I going to be held liable for this shit? Like, you know. So, but I think, do you think when it comes to the pen testing side and the AppSec side, which does fall into NIST, does fall into CMMC and PCI DSS and all this other stuff, At what point should you start be gauging yourself towards the further revision? Is it at first announcement? Is it at the beta revision? Like as soon as they say, "Hey, this is what it's looking like," like at what point do you start gearing up for that?
Usually, what I've tried to do and what I've told other folks to do when I've advised over the years is, wait for the public comment period to end, wait for them to, you know, come out with, any clarifications, things like that, because there it doesn't happen often, and not nearly as often as it should, but sometimes they'll come out and they'll change certain controls, or
Mhm.
they'll change the at least change the wording.
Yeah, because let's be
So
fair, CMMC 2.0 was NIST 800-171 to a T. All they did was collapse certain um, requirements into a singular requirement. But when you looked at it bullet for bullet, it was 800-171.
right, right. And yeah, it's one thing one thing you can count on with the government is there's going to be some word getting out that, hey, the rule is being published in the register, around this time frame. And, if you once the comment period closes, though, at that point you really need to pay attention and do a gap analysis and see, what's actually changed. In a lot of cases, the stuff doesn't change a ton. So more often than not, it's it's able to be controlled. You're not going to have a huge fire drill, but occasionally you have rules that come down, like, with with 171 Rev 3, or along the AppSec path, with CISA's rulemaking that came out last March, that federal contractors had to attest that you could meet the NIST, the Secure Software Development Framework standards. Um,
Well, SDLC is huge. Well,
yeah.
SSDLC. And to be fair, we've seen it with a lot of different pieces of software that have come out regardless, right? We look at Windows in the patch cycle and the way it's always fixing things and things like that. Like I truly think that SDLC does not exist in any software that came out prior to security being a thing. They may
Oh,
say it does, but the code itself is broken. If you can break into the code, somebody did not take the time to secure their code, especially something as simple as a buffer overflow.
oh, absolutely. There's so many basic vulnerabilities that get exploited. People talk about these apps that get popped and that sort of thing, and they think that it's a nation state attacker, when no, it's sloppy code. Um,
Yeah.
and so, the push to to force people to adhere to SSDF is good. One challenge, and I'm living this right now with my folks, is the NIST the NIST guidelines aren't super prescriptive.
No.
So you're
They never have been. No guideline ever has been. It's all been very vague.
right.
Implement a firewall. Doesn't tell you what rules to implement, doesn't tell you how to secure it. Use a firewall. Use a SIM. Use a logging mechanism. Use this. But it gives no and again, it's been years since I looked at especially PCI DSS, but it gives no instruction on how these things should be configured. And I think that's where a lot of the problem comes in because yes, businesses have business risk and things they accept or whatever, and those should be allowed through audits. Like, hey, yes, I'm accepting this per the framework because of X, Y, and Z. Cool, as long as you know it's there, but also know that if you get breached, if some shit happens, you're held liable.
Right.
Just because you accept the risk doesn't mean you're not liable for the risk. And I think things like that need to be stated outright.
No, absolutely. And I will say, I've worked in places, I've worked with organizations in consulting capacities where they don't take that stuff seriously. I also have to say my current company, you know, I'm fortunate as the leader of security and all all the compliance stuff. I'm the pain in everybody's ass. Um, I'm very fortunate though that the CEO down to our developers, our salespeople, everybody really does take security seriously. So, when you're talking about trying to implement a framework like SSDF and trying to map it to what's actually needed,
Mhm.
so you can give them the guidance they need to meet everything. They're they've been really great about um, working with me to put these changes in,
Right.
and it's they're they're sitting there ready and willing. uh they're coming to me like, hey, how can we help, how can we make this better, how can we make your life easier? And you don't see that in most organizations, especially from the development side. um
Well, the development side is about just kind of like engineering, right? Make the blinky lights blink. Does it work? It works. Is it efficient? Who the fuck knows? Is it secure? I don't know. It works though. But a lot of this comes down to communication though. When I look at things like AppSec, GRC, and everything else we do, it is the communication breakdown that I think breaks a lot of things. Because you have the customer on the distant end. It's like, hey, I want to be able to do all of this, and I want to be able to do it yesterday. And so you as a developer, as an engineer, or whatever, like, okay, is there any leeway? Like, can I do X, Y, and Z? You can do X. You're not allowed to do Y and Z. Shit. Okay. Like, and so you have this. It becomes very combative, and it becomes a problem. And this is where I feel like when I look at SDLC, when I look at the SSDF, when I look at AppSec and security as a whole. Look, I'm a security person, and I still get pissed off at security. I still get aggravated when I'm asked for MFA or something 30 times a day. I'm like, just let me in. Just let me in. Like, can we? But the problem is, you look at it and you're like, but it makes sense. Like, there's a reason behind this.
right.
But most people aren't going to see it that way. So we balance risk reward, business making money, my users of that business getting pissed off. It becomes a balancing act. And unfortunately, I think cybersecurity always loses. You always have more usability versus security.
Absolutely. And if you're with controls that you're rolling out and things like that, if if you introduce too much friction to the people that are stuck using this stuff, whether it's MFA or uh, you know uh, local admin, you tighten that up or anything like that, people are gonna, it's kind of like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Life finds a way. um, in this case, people find a way to bypass the controls. So the challenge becomes, how do you accomplish what you need to do and also minimize the friction that people
Do,
encounter.
do you think though? So do you? This is my opinion on it. When I look at like things like AppSec and secure software development and all the issues with Windows and browsers and all this other stuff, if developers had a better background and paid more attention to security when they develop things, would that usability versus security be as prevalent?
I don't think it would, but at the same time, there's a reason that I got into networking initially, and now on the security side, doing this stuff is because I suck at writing code. I
Me
am
too.
no
Me
I'm,
too.
I'm no good at it, and that's the same reason that the developers that create the programs that create software at my place, um, it's the same reason they don't go into security is they don't like it. They don't.
Yeah.
It's everybody's got their niche, so the challenge becomes trying to meet people where they are, trying to translate whether it's translating security to the business and trying to put dollars and cents to this stuff, or
Well, and Alyssa Miller, I think it was Alyssa Miller. There's been a few that have come on and talked about it. But you talk about your security champions within different areas of business. Those that understand that function of business, but no security. And I think if more organizations went towards that mindset of like, okay, let's take HR, for example, and the data they handle, but we're going to put a security person in there that understands what they do. And their whole job is to basically train, educate, and help develop the security mindset. And if somebody needs to interact with HR from a software development level, that security person could step in and say, hey, we want to evaluate this software. We want to look at the code. We want to do X, Y, and Z. So I think from a security champion mindset, you need that in every area of business. HR, software development, IT, even at your executive level. Uh, because let's be fair, they don't listen to CISOs. They
more
they
often than
very
not, they
rarely do
don't.
they do.
Yeah,
So so your CISO should be your security champion at the highest level. But if you're going to be a CISO, you need to have a voice and you need to be able to be heard. And you need to be willing to put your foot down and risk getting fired for stepping on the CEO or CFO or CRO or CIO's toes and saying, no, shut up. This is the way it needs to be. Because if you don't do it, this way, you're going to lose half your company in a week versus if you do it this way, yeah, it's an investment of $2 million versus losing $30 million.
right.
Just saying.
There's
We
that
need to
there's
have
that
this
cost benefit
conversation.
analysis, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
No, I think you know I think one of the ways, going back to reducing friction though, and trying to also create secure code is um, making it easier for the developers to not have to be security experts and
Yes.
leverage tools that will integrate with their IDEs, and as they're writing their code, it pops up
As they're writing versus when they're trying to push or get QA and things like that. Do it as they're
exactly.
writing the code. Hey, this statement, this call, this function introduces a buffer overflow. This whatever introduces, X, Y, and Z. You haven't sanitized your SQL, so now I can do, code injection, whatever the case may be. Yeah, I think if we were to do AI for security defense or secure defense or secure coding, I think that is where it really needs to come into play. Is hey, I've analyzed your entire output. You have a buffer overflow here. You have unsanitized input here. I can access your database based on, and they can even link it to Metasploit. Based on this, I can do all this.
Right.
Like, it's never going to be perfect. AI may eventually get to that point of perfection. I doubt it because it's man-made, but may. But I think if you introduce that type of AI into secure coding, into the programs that people use, the IDEs and things like that, I think it would go a lot further.
No, absolutely. And we're finishing up rolling out Sneak into our whole CI/CD pipeline, and one of the things that we're doing is leveraging the integration that they have with our standard IDE, which is JetBrains. And it's slick as hell because it will pop up and say, hey, this is an issue. And
I
they
like VS Code. I've always used VS Code with all the different plugins that show. But here's the thing: syntax errors, not development errors, not
yeah,
security errors. It's syntax. Does it work? Yeah, then you're good.
well, then you got this vibe coding bullshit that's come about all of a sudden. These people. I think it was on LinkedIn. Somebody said something. I think it might have been Marcus Hutchins. Said it takes a one times engineer, turns them into a 10 times engineer, but it takes the 10 times vulnerabilities that would have existed and makes them exponentially worse because you don't have any kind of AppSec in the mix.
Yep.
Um,
So let's do this, Scott. It's coming to the top of the hour. We got about 3 minutes left, and I do want to talk about further education, but I'm going to give you the floor because I talk about it every week. Very rarely do I let my guests take the floor, but I want you to take the floor. Let's talk about further education, how people can kind of get further in this career field or even break into the career field based on education. Because I had a long conversation about this the other day, so I'm interested in your viewpoint on it.
yeah, absolutely. So uh, I've been an adjunct at a few different places. I currently teach with University of Charleston, West Virginia, and education, there formal education is great, especially if it leads to certifications, which the programs I'm involved with do. But at the same time, when um, you have to invest in yourself and you have to take time and the initiative to lab stuff up, blow stuff up in your home lab, blow stuff up in a digital ocean node or something like that, and figure out how to break it so you know how to fix it. And so many people don't want to take the time and invest the additional time beyond the 8 to 5 to actually learn new stuff or to better themselves. It doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. You have to have that continuous learning mindset, kind of like continuous integration, continuous deployment with your pipelines. Your brain is a pipeline. Your skills are a pipeline. You have to keep continuously integrating new knowledge and skills and figuring out how you can deploy those into your daily work. So, yeah.
But you can't. It's never going to happen. No. No, when I look at education, so again, I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman, and I'm trying to go on his podcast. He's trying to get into cyber, going through CMU for a master's degree, and people had told him don't go for a degree or do only certifications or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, dude, any education is better than no education. So if you have the ability to get a master's, get a master's. What seriously, what's the worst that's going to come out of it? You get educated. Like if if it's something that you're paying money for, pay money for it and get it if you can afford it. Same with certification, same with anything else. Yes, the school of YouTube is free, except for the internet cost behind it. Everything has a cost.
Right.
It's what you're willing to pay. So no education is ever bad. If you can go through Try Hack Me, go through it. If you can do Hack the Box, go through it. If you can go through Sands, go through it. Like if you can do these, then do it. No education is ever bad, especially in cybersecurity. Anything and everything you learn always has value. It'll either teach you what not to do or what to do. One of the two.
Yeah.
You're either going to learn the right way to do something or the wrong way to do something, and somebody's going to tell you, yeah, you don't want to do that. You just don't. But that comes down to communication flow and being able to talk to others. Now, with that being said, we talked about a lot, Scott. I tried to had to eventually get through all the subjects, but I love you, homie. Any final words for anybody trying to break into the industry, trying to do big things with what we do?
Honestly, the biggest thing is don't let people tell you that there's one right path, because there are people with diverse backgrounds that I've come to know over the years that they didn't have any technical experience coming into the shit, and they're excellent cyber people, whether it's GRC, whether it's pen testing, whether it's on the defensive side. There is no one right path. And going back to the education thing too, if somebody tells you know you're stupid for doing a degree, or you don't need a degree, or whatever, or if they're not paying for it, and they're not living your life, don't let them shit on you like that. There are too many cases, and I see this all the time. People try to belittle others because these other people are accomplishing what the people belittling them can't, and that they're projecting their own bullshit onto you. Don't put up with it. Don't stand for it. Invest in yourself, because at the end of the day, that'll pay dividends.
Yeah, most definitely. And you're spot on, right? There's no one path. You have to make your own. You got to forge your own. All these people out there like, oh, I need someone that looks like this or does this or XYZ. Look, if you need someone to do something before you, you're just a follower and you're never going to make it. That's all you are. Go out there, break your own glass ceiling, forge your own path, bring your own tools, do what you need to do. But at the end of the day, everybody has a spot. And to your point, Scott, invest in yourself. You can't make money unless you spend money.
Yeah,
It's the way of the world right now. So
that's it.
invest in yourself, spend the money, do what you need to do to get better, to get more fluent in cybersecurity, regardless of whether that's certification training, degree oriented, or whatever the case may be. Go forth, learn, and become better, and become a better professional in this industry, especially when you're talking soft skills and things like that, and just foundational knowledge. There's so much you can get out of any type of program. Go forth and do it. Um, and you'll go far. You truly will. You'll show your ability to learn is the biggest thing. Now, with that being said, look, I love all of you. You're all my warriors. You're all my family, and this has been another amazing episode. Security Happy Hour. Catch you all enough. I will catch you all next week. I cannot talk today. It's another amazing episode. Until then, take care.